I hope you've been enjoying the morning so far. Really appreciate it. All right, so coming up, we have a really, really cool discussion that will be led by Andy Sheehan of KDKA. He's an investigative reporter where he focuses on in-depth investigative and enterprise reporting. His reporting has won many awards, very, very exciting stuff. For your Emmy Awards, the Edward R. Murrow, PBA, and the Golden Quills. Everyone, I would like to welcome Andy Sheehan from KDKA.
It's great to be here. I wanted to not talk about myself, but what's that? Not on?
Can we get Andy's lav turned on, please? Also, to appreciate all of your patience, we're working with students here at the Playhouse. That's what we do. We like to incorporate them in a lot of our programming. So if we could just get Andy's mic on. Do another check.
Checking 1, 2, 3.
There we go.
Check.
All righty.
1, 2, 3. We have a lot of young kids here in the audience, high school kids, and maybe considering becoming journalists in your life. And I'm here, and folks up here are to tell you that we heartily endorse you taking that path in life. It's been, for me, this has been an incredible career. I've had a front row seat on many major events and talked to interesting people and communicated with the public and even brought about some meaningful change in life. The environment that I grew up in, however, has changed. I started when I got out of college, I worked for a local newspaper, maybe 30,000 circulation, covered sort of planning boards and city council meetings in 3 different towns, and in about 3 years I became sort of a working journalist. And that was a terrific training program for me, but that no longer exists. About half the newspapers in the United States, especially those small town newspapers, have disappeared. So you don't have that. I was able to, the idea would be that you'd go work on a small newspaper and then you'd apply to a bigger newspaper. And that's what I did, and I came here to Pittsburgh and worked for the Post-Gazette for 7 years. And then later I got a job. I was hired by KDKA TV to do investigative journalism on TV. So it's been wonderful, but the landscape over the course of my career has changed, and there's many major challenges facing local media, both print and on broadcast. And so we're here to talk about some of those challenges. We're here to say, what are these challenges? We obviously are living in a polarized country. Many of the news operations that exist today are polarized themselves. The newspaper's objective journalism has been fading, and in the prior session we talked a lot about AI and the bifurcation of media. So today we have a terrific panel to discuss all these things that I'm going to introduce. Chris Baxter is the CEO and founding editor of Spotlight, which is a terrific investigative organ in the state of Pennsylvania. Gina Seibert is the assistant director of Pittsburgh Media Partnership. And Mike Zula is the education program manager for the Partnership to Advance Responsible Technology. So, so we live in this challenging media environment. How have things changed? We'll start with Mike, with Chris rather. How have things changed since you started in journalism?
Yeah, I mean, things have changed a lot, right? The sort of traditional business model for news has collapsed. But in that collapse, as it relates to folks here today, the sort of old way that you would kind of get into reporting and journalism has sort of collapsed, right? So it used to be, and it still was when I was in college, that if you really wanted to, get a job as a reporter coming out of school, you would try to get an internship at a paper every summer, and each summer you try to kind of get to a bigger paper, right? And then hopefully try to get the experience from that, get a job after. And there was just sort of this like, standard path you followed. All of that is disrupted, right? So many places don't even have internships anymore. Places have disappeared. It's just become a lot different than it was then. I will say though, and I think this is really, really important to understand, that in all of the change that's happening in news and being a journalist, it is ironically easier for you all, and especially those that are really motivated and persistent and can really master the fundamentals of just asking good questions and being able to write well. You can actually get into the field and make a difference, right, faster than ever. Because that old model, it used to be that you'd have to just put in your time, right? You'd have to go to this outpost somewhere and work there for 3 years and then try to move into the main office and try to move up beats, and it could take a long time before you were on a beat, or you could get yourself on the front page, right, have an impact. The beauty now, and the beauty of Spotlight PA, which a statewide nonprofit that I run, is that people who are good and who want it can come in and make a difference right away, right? If you're innovative, if you're creative, there's just more opportunity now and more interesting kind of avenues to follow to do the work. So I actually think it's a really exciting time to get in, just because you don't have to necessarily pay those dues, but you do still have to master the fundamentals. And I think that's sometimes just where some college programs I see or whatever get lost. They spend too much time chasing, like, we need to train them on the X51 new camera model, right? No, chances are when you get to us, we don't use X51, we use something else. We're gonna teach you how to do that. But what we can't really teach, right, what you are learning now is what I mentioned before, which is how to be inquisitive, how to be critical of the information you're getting and to question it, how to ask a good question, and really most importantly, and this has not changed one bit, being able to write clearly and accurately. Good, clear writing remains the number one thing. In all the different things we do, all the different platforms we put stories across, when we assess candidates coming in the door, first and foremost, we're looking at the quality of their writing.
So the fundamental tools of journalism and the fundamental skills remain preeminent, right? Gina, you had something called the Pittsburgh Media Partnership. Can you tell people what that is and how that sort of circumventing the traditional media models?
The Pittsburgh Media Partnership is a collection of 34 member news outlets within southwestern PA. They're coming together under this partnership to sort of work together to figure out how news organizations, local news organizations can, move forward in this ever-changing environment, in this sometimes very challenging industry, to deliver better journalism and to better connect with communities. And one thing that's really interesting about this partnership is that it's under the Center for Media Innovation, which is under the Point Park University, and it allows different sort of outlets for young journalists to write not for the traditional newsroom necessarily, but there's often at least 2 interns and employees and reporters, and we currently have 2 right now in our audience, Aaron and Hannah, who write for the Pittsburgh Media Partnership website and report for them. And what happens is these news pieces that they produce get sent around to all of the partners so that they can pool those pieces and use them in their own outlets. And so maybe they can't cover this one topic, or they can't cover this meeting or this major event. And so because of time constraints, because they don't have a reporter to do it. And so this allows for, greater support for news outlets that are really strapped for time, really strapped for resources. And, they're able to have this type of reporting to support whatever else they are doing. And I think this also shows that the avenue into journalism and to being a professional in the news industry is once again changing. Similar to what you were saying about how it's not necessarily working your way up from the hyper-local newsroom, up to different tiers of the system. You can write and report for different nonprofits that aren't typical, news outlets and things like that, or different hyper-local, hyper-specific outlets that maybe aren't seen as a traditional outlet. And I think that shows that the information ecosystem and the jobs available within it is constantly changing. It's a little bit different than what it looked like, a couple decades ago, but there's a lot of opportunities to find a journalism job and do good journalism.
I work in local television news, and rare is the person who's under 54 years old sitting down in front of a television set and tuning in the 6 o'clock news. We find that most younger people are getting their information from either Instagram or TikTok. How, you want to take a stab at this? How do we get quality, responsible, deep journalism in front of the eyeballs of younger people?
Absolutely. So at the Partnership to Advance Responsible Technology, we work on the responsible development, deployment, and then governance of emerging technologies, right now notably AI. I work with K through 12 schools. The really nice thing, the big breath of fresh air that all of us can breathe right now is that, one, it's not too early to be learning all of these foundational things about technology, about responsible technology, and about artificial intelligence. Thirdly, it's just not too late either, right? We could start now. So we work with schools, we work with students to develop your own media via podcasting, right? So imagine you're sitting in your AP English 2, because we're overachievers, because you're all here, right? You're all on a field trip, so you're overachievers. You're in AP English 2. Instead of getting the prompt and simply writing it out, you actually get to turn it into media via a podcast, because I know through all of my legal studies that the best way to synthesize and the best way to understand something is to be able to say it back out loud, right? And we have technology now that can give us a grade back before we even give it to a teacher. In terms of what are we engaging with, right? What is real? You have that gut twinge, right? You have that feeling of this no longer feels neutral, right? The word technology is a neutral word, right? The word technology should not make you feel good nor bad. The same way that I think the word podcasting sits, right? I have been kicked out, not really, but some schools think that podcasting is a bad word. That doesn't make me feel good, right? That doesn't make anybody trust anybody. You, as you're scrolling your phone, you have that initial gut reaction. Is this good or is this bad? When you have that reaction, I think the easiest thing to do, whether a journalist, whether a lawyer, whether a scientist, is to simply start your fact check. Is your fact check a Google search? Is your fact check a book? Or are you using artificial intelligence to do your fact check? Right? None of those are wrong. I don't know which one is the most correct. I think I would take a stab that a book is still going to be your best source of information, followed by your Google search, followed by whatever artificial intelligence already learned from that Google search. So you trust your gut, right? You trust, is this something that is good or is this something that's bad? We go to our local news first when there's traffic on the Liberty Bridge, right? We're not going on Instagram, at least I'm not. Maybe you are. So trust your gut. That would be my first response to that.
Well, certainly there are major pitfalls with AI and the introduction of AI, right? You know, I've done a lot of stories in the last 2 years about AI, you know, our local economy. We seem to be putting all our eggs in that basket around, you know, Carnegie Mellon and natural gas energy to power data centers, and this may be transformative for the local economy. But you know, it may also end up in people losing jobs at back office functions at PNC or at UPMC, and not the least of which in journalism. You know, these AI can write stories for us. We emphasized earlier about the need to have basic journalism skills, and it's very easy, even the introduction using ChatGPT or Grok under deadline. For me, you know, it's a slippery slope in terms of laziness and not doing the due diligence of this. So those are the dangers. You emphasized a bit of the upside to AI. I'm wondering specifically in Spotlight, using AI as an investigative tool. Are you making any inroads there in terms of using AI as an investigative help to you in you doing your work?
So in the reporting process, we definitely use it to help us synthesize data or identify patterns in data, or to quickly look through a large volume of documents or information. The way we think about AI, and this was sort of my own personal evolution, because I would say at the beginning of the year, I was sort of like, I know I need to like make use of this more, but I can't quite figure out like how in a useful way. I just was sort of stuck. And what I came to realize was I was stuck because I was thinking about AI as being 100% of the solution. Like, this thing is gonna like do this whole thing for me. And what I came to realize was the correct way to think about it was, this thing's gonna get me like 60% of the way there. It's like, it's gonna get me started. It's gonna give me some ideas. It's gonna surface some patterns. It's gonna, right? It's gonna help me, but then I've gotta take it the rest of the way. A, because I can't really fully trust it, but B, because it's just not good enough in most cases to go 100% of the way. So
it's certainly getting better. I mean, in leaps and bounds. I mean,
and there's
it's
certain
getting more accurate as the day goes on.
There's certain components of it that I think are farther along. So, for example, in our business and operations side of the organization, we have implemented workflow changes and things built on custom coded, almost entirely by AI. So I didn't have to go bother our newsroom developer who has coding skills. I could keep her focused on the editorial and newsroom work because I was able to create, integrations and API calls and all this other stuff that, like, I know it's a thing that can be done. Like, I have enough awareness to know like what technologically we can do, but I simply couldn't sit down and code it myself. And so now we can create all of these workflow solutions and business solutions much faster and much easier.
See, that's fantastic. And right now, the way I'm using it now, on a very rudimentary way, is just, to ask Grok, what's up on this topic. And I mean, it searches the internet and instantaneously, and it basically gives you that starting point. Right? This is what's out there. This is what's been reported. I mean, yes, verify everything it's telling you, but this is your launching point.
Yeah, there's I don't know how many of you are familiar with Canva. It's like an online design. Yeah, so Canva now has a coding component. And the cool thing about Canva's coding component is that a lot of the other AI services, like I like to use Claude through Anthropic a lot, but their visual design capabilities are really bad, really, really bad. Canvas is not. And so you can go into Canva, and this is just like, I was playing with this the other night because I'm a nerd, and you can tell it to create a game. So I was like, I want to create a newspaper game where like the newspaper truck's rolling along the street and I have to toss the papers at the house and it's going to speed up as it goes, right? And it created it, right? And I could play it and I could record a high score, right? So a very simple thing, but just think like, because we think about like gamifying the news and how to kind of have a balanced relationship with people. So you're right, like it is progressing and I think there are these ways we can use it. We're also using it just to better serve our readers. So the biggest AI thing that we've developed on a public-facing basis is our election AI chat tool. That's trained on our content and only trusted content. We fully control on the back end. Like we can see how it would answer any question. We can edit its answers. So there's a lot of human control. But nonetheless, over the past 2 years, we've been able to answer thousands and thousands of questions about the voting process here in Pennsylvania that otherwise we would never have been able to answer, like on a one-to-one, answering people's emails or comments coming in. So I know like the chat tool is like arguably the kind of most basic, most talked about function, but I do like to share it because we have been able to sort of like wrangle it on a very difficult topic where you don't want a single wrong answer in play, right, on voting, and how it's been able to really serve lots of people in a way that we couldn't have done ourselves.
Gina, are young reporters adapting to this? Are they? Go ahead.
Yeah, it seems, I think the younger generation has kind of a leg up, perhaps, because you're growing up and this technology is, coming to be the centerpiece of a lot of conversations, a lot of everyday use in the past, 3-4 years now. And I actually think young people, because of all the misinformation that's been, put into the environment, even pre-AI, now with all the development of misinformation generated from AI, I feel like they are set up to have a better eye for some of this stuff than some of the older generations. I know some older relatives in my family, struggle sometimes to see things I see as blatantly AI generated. And I think there's also a healthy skepticism amongst young people because they've been in an information environment that they have to be skeptical of growing up in this, of these tools, of these technologies. And from my sense of things, I get the sense from younger reporters and reporters kind of in general that there's this idea of being a little bit wary of bringing AI in, sort of, having boundaries around what is it going to be doing? Is it something that is idea generation, topic generation? Is it writing the news article? And studies have shown that the public is, very skeptical and doesn't really want to read content that's generated from AI. There's more of an acceptance of AI kind of being used to transcribe something or on the back end for different scheduling purposes or some of the stuff you were speaking about. But there's this hesitance about this, and there's less trust in ChatGPT, for instance, than there is in the news. Now, both of these statistics are a little bit lower, but still, the news is edging out, right? So one point I wanted to make today is that there's an opportunity for the news industry and for upcoming journalists to really embrace the idea of how can I prove that I'm trustworthy and authentic and that I do quality work. Quality work done by, hopefully and almost entirely, but predominantly by a human, right? This is a business opportunity, this is an opportunity for the industry to, say, hey, if you are overwhelmed by the misinformation out there, you don't know what to trust, what information is reliable, here is, a source of information that makes it its business, its job to be credible, to be accurate. And there's actually also been studies shown that, the public are flocking to these quality, information sources in the wake of all of this misinformation in the environment. So I think there's a lot of promise there to sort of, take over that messaging and display that we are really invested in being trustworthy.
So we think there is an appetite in the public for in-depth investigative journalism. Do we? Is it there? And if it is there and sort of locked up, how do you unlock it to try to get that in front of people? That's a big question, I suppose.
Yeah, I think asking it that
I'll tell you one thing, 60 Minutes, people, in my work, they're always saying, I have a 4 or 5 minute package, which is a lifetime in television news. And they're saying cut it down, cut it down. My editors would say that to me. But, you know, 60 Minutes has been in the top 10 of television shows for the last 30 years. People, you know, those are 8, 10-minute pieces, in-depth pieces. So people, you know, people tune in, they do that. And I tell them, you know, there is a hunger for this. People want to know what's going on, the story behind the story.
Yeah, I think in some ways there's a better way to frame the question. So for us, it's just like, it's not framing the question of like whether there's interest in what we do. For us, it's, is there interest in how people's tax, like, do people care about how their tax dollars are spent? Do people care about what elected officials are doing in their name? Do they care whether there's corruption at their local wastewater plant? Do they, right? And the answer to all those things is yes. Like, people absolutely care.
Right.
Number one, it's having the quality of reporter, editor, and organization to still be able to go and get that kind of story. Because, you know, so I worked, my first job was at the Morning Call in Allentown, and then I was at the Star Ledger in New Jersey, and we used to do reader surveys. And we'd ask people, what more do you want? Right? And they would say, oh, I want more reporters at my town council meeting, at my zoning hearing board. I want, you know, where's the reporter at the school board? And we say, okay. And then we'd ask people, what would you pay for? None of that. Sports, obits, obituaries, and always third or fourth was investigative or enterprise, right? Now you might ask then, well, then how come that wasn't always emphasized? Well, because it's the most expensive, it's the hardest to do, it's the most legally risky, it takes a commitment top to bottom, and a lot of the changes in the industry have been the antithesis of those things. However, we have known, and it has been true for a while now, that people assign value to that work. And we're living, like Spotlight PA is living proof of that concept, because if that weren't true, we wouldn't be here anymore. I mean, we're 6 years in.
Tell us how Spotlight works. You have member reporters they're working for different newspapers.
Yeah, so Spotlight PA, we're a statewide nonprofit. We cover the state government and statewide issues. We're 6 years old. We focus on investigative and public service journalism. So the investigative accountability piece, but also the explanatory and the service, sort of how you can make change piece. Today we're 33 folks all across the state. We have 2 community newsrooms that we've opened in State College and Berks County around Reading. And we are a public access, public service model. So our work is free and available to all as a nonprofit, but we also make it available to now 132 partner newsrooms across Pennsylvania that can republish and do republish the work at no cost. So that's traditional newspapers, student publications, commercial TV, public radio, community weeklies, I mean, you name it, they get it from us. The scary part is that without us, like if we were to be wiped off the face of the planet tomorrow, the vast majority of news organizations across the state, which are still the primary sources of information in their community, would have basically no state capital or statewide coverage. Put another way, they would basically have no reporting from anywhere other than where they are located, which is a significant issue. I always often have to say this when I'm in Philadelphia, where I'll hear concern about the state of Pennsylvania's politics and its political outcomes, and you know, we have no stake or opinion in that, but it's something we hear. And I say, well, how much time have you spent actually understanding the rest of the state, which is actually determining those outcomes? And it's like none, right? And so it's already a problem, but then imagine we have no connective tissue anymore in terms of information about one another. It becomes so much worse. It also makes us so much more vulnerable to divisive politics, which we saw some of in the most recent budget stuff going on, playing parts of the state against one another, and unfortunately quite effectively.
If you haven't read or seen Spotlight, they have done remarkable work, and they have gone a long way to fill that void of, you know, these news deserts that we have now because these local newspapers have gone under. it's one thing about trying to get this information to the public. It's another thing of gaining the trust of the public in the information, right? You know, we live in this media environment that you young people have inherited, where the polarized country has resulted in polarized news, where people either are in a silo that is Fox News and Newsmax, or liberal silo that has MSNBC and to some extent CNN and the like. The social media platforms also are tilting one way or the other. So how are we to try to reestablish trust with the public in a polarized? You want to take that? Yeah, we do.
I'll take it from a very 30,000 foot view perspective, which is we all, young folks in the room included, folks my age, older folks, we all need to get really comfortable asking each other questions again, right? I'm really exhausted hearing, hi, how are you? Good, cool. Right, it's not meaningful, we talked about connective tissue already, there's zero connection there. What is artificial intelligence, right? Did you ask that before you attended, before you sat down? If you can't define it, this whole day is probably just gonna be a wash. When you're uploading something into Grok, into ChatGPT, into Gemini, into Claude, what is happening when that happens? You need to be able to ask those questions, right? As a journalist, if God forbid anybody were to bring a suit of libel or defamation against you, the first thing your lawyer's gonna say is, what happened? Guess what's not gonna be a completely viable defense right now? Yeah. I put it into AI. Right? Your lawyer's probably gonna walk out of the room really frustrated. So we need to get better at asking each other questions, asking questions about the world around us, understand what the job market was like for the folks in this room, ask your parents what the job market was like, your grandparents, right? Understand why is technology this new industry, this industrial revolution, this technological revolution in our backyards. Right? It's not far away from us in Silicon Valley anymore. It's really close. So why is that? Let's keep asking each other those questions.
That's a good intro to our question and answer session here. Does anybody?
Right. I have the stick mic over here. Please raise your hand. We have time for a few questions of our panel. Who wants to go first? Come on, someone has to have a question. Over here. All right, I'm making my way. If you could just say your name, where you're from, and what your question is.
I know.
My name is Renee Stallings, and I'm from Greater Latrobe High School, and I just want to know, how can we get involved with you? Would you be willing to connect with Latrobe, Pennsylvania, which is like an hour away?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll talk later.
Okay, I thought it was going to be too much like that, but I think that we'd really appreciate that, because our school is AI or all in, and we have to figure out how to get these students to be technologically aware and using them effectively, and that's what I'd really like to do.
Right, and I don't want to take too much time, and I don't want to speak for the other panelists either, but like, the broad consensus that I want educators in the room to take from this is to really just like be asking these questions to every panelist at every conference, right? If you go to a conference and you didn't talk to at least somebody afterwards, what was really the point, aside from a great free lunch, which is also a great reason to go to a conference. But yeah, like nonprofits like all of ours are just more than happy to plug in, especially in the K through 12 level, because that's our future too.
Question over here. Perfect. If you could say your name, where you're from, and your question.
I'm Ella Burkle. I'm from Bethel Park High School. So with AI becoming as realistic as it is today, is there going to be a point where the AI checkers aren't able to detect it?
That's a great question. I love that question. I think it's important to point out in a journalistic context, that AI detection checkers are always going to be several steps behind the actual AI tools. They are already faulty, they're already incomplete, and you have to be skeptical of them as well. It is not enough to run something through an AI checker and just rely on it as it's telling you for sure with no other context, no other follow-up that it is AI or not. For instance, in an education context, turnitin.com, when it checks for AI, is not always completely accurate in reading whether or not a student's work is AI generated or not. This goes the same for images. As a result, the skills that you are developing for the students in their room as a journalist to think critically, to gather multiple information sources to cross-check them, will become really important in truly figuring out if something is AI generated or not, especially as these tools advance.
Got a question up here. On your right.
Paul Ritchie with Allegheny Independent Media. My question's for Chris Baxter. Like you said that you use AI to analyze data, and like, do you have any other statisticians or data journalists to double check what, you know, the analysis that the AI did? I don't know, for me, that's my bias. You know, artificial intelligence shouldn't replace real intelligence.
So people checking, fact checking the AI.
Yeah, we don't trust anything it tells us. But we trust it enough to like get us on the right path, right? Hopefully. But we're checking that, so we're gonna know if it's not. But you know, when it comes to suggested headlines, suggested SEO keyword strings, like so we use it for suggestions because it might come up with like a framework of a concept in a story that we hadn't thought of. So a lot of the times, like, I don't think we've even ever taken a whole suggested headline ever for a story, but we've definitely taken like turns of phrases or words, like, hey, this headline's feeling kind of boring. What would you do to like spice it up, right? And again, it's gonna be wacky, but within that wacky, oftentimes there's like a good idea or just like a way that we hadn't thought about, and like, oh, I could build off that. And that's what I mean by thinking about it as like getting you going, right? It's not 100%, you're not gonna trust it for the full output, but it can like get you thinking in something you might not have thought of before.
You do worry about the erosion of journalistic skills, right? I mean, I grew up in the dark ages where even to like trace the ownership of a certain property, you'd go down to the Hall of Records and there'd be these big plat books and you'd have to take a ruler and figure, you know, sure, that's a lot of legwork and wasted, effort that could be, the time is saved now with these tools. But just to have everything sort of given to you, you no longer have and realize the source of this information, you know. I just worry about that.
I think that's a really good point. I just want to jump in there that as journalistic skills are eroded, not just by AI technologies, but it's a long-term process, other technologies and things that play into this. But with AI accelerating this, at the same time, those same skills are becoming increasingly important in the era we're in, because AI, chatbots, all those things are incredibly inaccurate a lot of times. They're getting better, but there's still studies coming out that they are just not always hitting the mark. And when the stakes are so high for journalistic content, you know, not just for the for the credibility of the institution, but also legally, you can't mess around with hoping that without checking the AI is correct on facts X, Y, and Z. On top of that, a lot of the promises of AI to reduce labor, to make it more streamlined, isn't necessarily coming to fruition in a lot of cases. As you were mentioning, there's a lot of human oversight that has to kind of comb through and recheck what AI does. And for certain tasks and projects, it starts to be like, well, how much time did I actually save at the end of the day? And I think that's something to always keep at the forefront of our minds.
I think one takeaway we're sort of hearing here is that, you know, the game of journalism has changed, but the basics remain. And those skills, to me, it's a commitment. It's a life commitment to the craft, and that means that it's a 24/7 occupation where you become sort of a sponge for information. Every time you're at a social event or a party or an interaction, you're working as a journalist. You know, I haven't been a data journalist in my life. I've been mostly a source person. I've you know, worked in Pittsburgh for several decades now, and you know, what I've developed here is a network of sources. I know hundreds of people. I know the policemen on the corner up to the heads of big corporations and everybody in between. And those people help me do my job. But it's a commitment, and it's a learning of the basic skills, and that is not going to change.
All right, we're about to go into our next session. However, I have one more question from a student that I think that we haven't talked about. It's a great question. Maybe even Andy could provide some context to this as well.
Hi, my name is John Tutera. I'm from Rank Regional, and my question to you is, I heard like a rumor, like I read some, that Pittsburgh is going to become like an AI like hub almost, where like all the AI companies are going to start building their warehouses and factories here and run their AI servers out of here. And like, how is that going to affect us as living in Pittsburgh?
Well, it's the idea here from our leadership is that, you know, that Pittsburgh is going to become sort of an ecosystem of AI. You have Carnegie Mellon, and you have Pitt that is developing these technologies. You have sources of energy in the Marcellus Shale, which is cheap natural gas, and you have all these sort of empty industrial sites that once had steel mills. So the idea here, what's being promoted, is that you will create this sort of new economy here where you'll be building these data centers which will supply the computing power for AI companies. That'll be supplied by this cheap energy from the natural gas fracking that we've done in Washington counties. They'll be along the rivers because these data centers require a lot of water as a coolant. And hopefully, because you've developed all this this infrastructure, that there'll be a whole big resurgence or a proliferation of AI companies. Now, if you're in construction and if you're an engineer, that's all great. And there'll probably be, you know, ancillary employment all around that, but tech companies don't employ a lot of people, which is one of the concerns. And, you know, we don't know the future, but AI is going to be changing the economy. There'll be jobs that we don't even know about, that defy our own description at this point. But in the short term, it's going to be a problem for people that you know, are at a call center, say, or you know, work for insurance companies. You know, when you go check on your medical coverage, you're probably going to be talking to an AI instead of a human being. So, in the short term, there's going to be layoffs, you know, this is a concern.
Also add real quickly to the job concern is something to think about. I think, especially in a Pittsburgh context, is the environmental concerns. AI is so far probably going to outpace the airline industry in carbon emissions. Concerns about electricity demands, water consumption, as you mentioned, and maybe impacts on water. I think in a city like Pittsburgh, where we fought a lot to, you know, combat pollution in the air and in the water and things like that, are still fighting these issues. It's something that we as citizens should keep at the forefront of our minds as that shifts to AI industry here.
I just want to speak directly to the students one more time. The best thing you could be doing is like asking these questions.